if AI invents your whole project goal, then the whole spec is going to be completely wrong. Now, here are the 3 things you have to decide before AI writes anything at all. So you're going to have to decide on what the North Star is, what is the outcome of your project, who's your target audience, what kind of pain you're actually trying to solve. Now, a bonus thing that you can also think about is, what does success actually look like? This is actually really important, and I'll talk about that later. Now, here's what actually happens if you give AI a super vague idea at the beginning of a session and it starts programming everything. It will create maybe a small spec or a small document on what it should do, but it will assume everything about your project, and by assuming, it's gonna create an AI slop version that anyone else can also create. It's gonna look alright, but it's probably gonna look very similar to other tools that people are building. It will probably get a lot of the logic wrong because you didn't define that, and the usability is going to be terrible. So AI should write parts of the document, but it should not make the important decisions. And here are a few of the most important decisions it should be making. And it's going to be very similar to what you actually decided. And it should ask you a lot of questions around the North Star, the goal, the outcome of your app. If you can answer that, it's actually going to make a lot of the decisions that will lead to a good outcome. It will lead to your web app solving that problem that the North Star describes. And it should also ask questions around what kind of pain you're trying to solve and how you're actually going to try and solve it. It can also give you some ideas on how to solve it. But by defining the pain, you're already addressing a particular type of audience that has that pain. And you can even narrow it down by giving more information around what type of audience you're targeting. And that's very important for how usable, or the usability aspect of your app. So the more information, the more questions you can answer for these parts of the spec, the better your outcome will be, and the better the LLM is actually going to understand how to implement everything. Now, probably the hardest part of the spec for non-developers is going to be the technical answers. And don't worry, there are some really good solutions. And one thing that I recommend that you do is, if you're starting out and you haven't really created a web app before, you might not be familiar with all of the technical jargon. What I recommend that you do is that you tell Claude to actually approach this as a deep research part of the spec. And it's actually, before it's going to implement anything, it's actually going to do some deep research, and it's going to suggest what kind of options you have based on your budget, based on where you actually want to host it. So maybe you want to host it on a Hetzner VPS. And it's going to give you a lot of recommendations. And the more web apps you build, the more you're going to actually learn about the whole technical architecture part. And you're going to realize what actually is the easiest way to approach a certain web app. And yeah, I think this is incredibly useful, especially when you're moving into domains that you're not very familiar with. You can always approach the technical part or even other parts of the web app with one or several deep research tasks. And that's going to improve your spec a lot. So it's going to give your spec the key technical decisions, and you still got some control. Now, last but not least, we've got the visual part, and I think this is something you have to handle separately, because you don't want the LLM to actually make all the decisions for the design itself. It's just gonna create a front-end design that looks like nearly every other front-end design. What you actually want to do here is you maybe want to start with some visual examples. You find some examples on Google, some images. You can use the Claude Designer, and you can create a version of a front end that you feel like will attract your target audience. And the more time you spend on the front end, the better it's going to be. And you can also look up some other CSS libraries. You definitely don't want to use Tailwind because every vibe coder is using Tailwind. That's why all of the front ends look the same. And the more you start building front ends, you're going to realize that. So there are many other options to choose from. And yeah, that's it basically. So AI can actually write the spec, but the content and most of the decisions, the critical decisions, should actually come from you. They should come from research. And yeah, the more time you spend on it, the better the outcome is going to be.